Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a very exciting episode of the Sinead Says Podcast. We're going to talk all things sex and relationships with Aisling Keenan. She has her own, I'm going to let her tell you anyway, but she has her own podcast, and I found her on the charts, and I was like, oh, and when I started listening, I was like, Irish, and then I burst out laughing, and I was like the whole podcast was so fun. So I was like, I need to get her on because I'm dying to talk about sex, but I can't talk about it as much unless I'm with someone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, Aisling, first of all, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Hope you're well. So first of all, you're a journalist and you came from the magazine world, the toxic world.
Yeah.
So, first of all, just tell us a little bit about you and, what you do.
Yeah, of course. Well, thanks for having me. I'm very excited. And I also found you on the chart, and because we're kind of side by side, and I was like, I started listening, and I was thinking, like, in some ways what we're doing is kind of similar, because we're both trying to help people with the podcast. And the editor of a magazine. I started out in magazines 15 years ago, and in my first job, actually, I wrote the sex pages for the magazine that I worked for. So I had that's kind of where that interest started. So I did a lot of things in the magazine, but that was one of the things I did. And then I went through my career and was editing magazines. And then the magazine that I was the editor of closed down, just purely because magazines, there's magazines closing down all over the place. And, there's so much of what would have been in print is moving online. And then I started, I became freelance, and I started, being a freelance journalist. And I do a lot of beauty journalism as well, but I really enjoyed that kind of sex and relationships side of things from back doing the sex column. So I decided I was going to do a podcast. I started it, it's called Private Education, and I started it about 4 years ago now. I started it because in Ireland, sex education was shit. I got such a bad sex education, and the main kind of focus of it was don't get pregnant and basically kind of don't have sex. There was absolutely no inclusive language. There was no, gay sex. There's this kind of sex. There's that kind of sex. There was absolutely no talk about pleasure or the fact that it can be enjoyed. We also never really got any decent relationship education. No one ever told us how to have an argument, how to maintain a healthy, loving relationship, how relationships change over time, how to deal with conflict in relationships, how to deal with, when you grow apart, or there was no practical sex and relationships education in my experience. And I know it has changed since I was in school, but I still think there was a huge place there for adult sex education. So that's kind of what I wanted to do with Private Education. And so, I'm tipping away with it now, and I'm still really enjoying making the episodes, and it's doing pretty well. So that's basically it.
Oh yes. And I'm so excited to just talk about sex and all the, it's so funny because I put up a question box last night and they were rolling in. It's mental how much, there isn't education on this. For me as well, we've got Catholic shame. We can't talk about sex.
Totally same. Yeah.
And, let's just say, and I just think, I always say this, if you're having sex, or no, if you're in a relationship or you're single, whatever, you're having sex most of the time, most days out of the year, you're having sex, say 2-3 times a week or once a week, whatever, but you're having sex regularly, but we never talk about it, and we cannot talk about it with our partners.
No. And it's so bizarre because sex and relationships, if you think about it, drive so many of our decisions in our life. They literally drive, most of our core values are in some way based around, whether it's romantic relationships, friendships, colleagues, relationships with colleagues. And then beyond that, then it's, it is sex. It's who I'm having sex with, who I had sex with. What did that feel like? What did I learn from that experience? It's so much of what we do and what we think about and how our lives progress is to do with sex and relationships. And yet we're never given any formal education about it. And we're also, so then we're expected to just, pick up things from television or from friends or from porn or and it just, the sources of our education, I find, aren't particularly good or well informed, or anything. So yeah, I think it is good to talk, and you're totally right about the Catholic shame thing as well. Like I went to a Catholic school, and it was just, you just didn't talk about it, do you know?
Yeah.
And if you did talk about it, you were told to feel ashamed.
And it can affect our relationship so much, because a lot of the questions in the question marks that we're going to go through today, you know, a lot of people are in love, but they're not having sex. And it's something that you can't talk about. And because you feel shame to sit down and be like, let's talk about our sex life, or let's go get help with a sex therapist, or, and I feel like, you know, if you're in love with someone, but you're not having sex, you need to talk about it, and you need to go through the steps. And it's like, you know, you have to try as well.
Totally.
With a therapist or with information like this. And, you know, because why give up on love just because you're not having sex? Like, there's a problem why you're not having sex. And it could be something so simple, like you're feeling really insecure, you're not feeling loved and validated. So, or you're not, this person could be just not initiating it. So then that person doesn't, and they don't talk about it. And there's this massive resistance, or there's like a misaligning of the energy of, like I talked about on today's podcast that's coming out today. Sorry, just mix you up, about sexual attraction, you know, coming in and out because you're too masculine in your energy and you're too feminine, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, there's so many reasons why you're in love, but you're not having sex. So let's fucking talk about it.
Let's do it. Let's do it. I'm so excited. I love answering questions. Like, that's my favorite thing to do on the podcast.
Yeah, I'm same, and especially about sex, I'm all into it. And there's so many. Okay, right, where are we even going to begin? It's so bad. It makes me feel so sad, some of them, like, you know, because it's a lot of like lack of confidence. I'm trying to get a good juicy one for the start. All right, this is like, you know, is it normal to like go through phases of not having sex with your partner? And for me, I think this is so normal. I feel like there's times of attraction, and there's times of like having a complete stretch, and it depends on you. But I have those moments where I communicate with Jack, but like, hey, I don't really feel really comfortable at the minute. I'm feeling very insecure. Also, I have endometriosis/adenomyosis, which gives me pain. So when we have our weekly relationship meetings, I'll tell him about my pain and about the times I wanted to have sex where he should have initiated, and times where I didn't. And I always sometimes be like, oh, I'm sorry if I can't do that on those days. But what do you think about these stretches of no sex?
I mean, the first thing to always say, and I get that question really regularly as well from so many people, people in relationships, people out of relationships. Like, it is so normal, particularly in a relationship. When you're with someone, it is so normal to have dry patches, as I might call them, and then times where all you want to do is have sex. And it's completely normal. And it waxes and wanes, and you know, your sex drives also, you have to bear in mind, two individuals in a relationship will have different sex drives, regardless of whether it's, you know, a same-sex relationship, a hetero relationship. People, like, there will always be one partner who wants it more and one partner who wants it less, just naturally. And it would be very rare to actually find two people who are completely aligned in terms of how much they want to have sex. And then you have to take into account things like you said, your endometriosis, or, you know, your period, your menstrual cycle, any periods of stress, if you've got children, if you're having, you know, a difficult time at work. There's so many reasons why you might be in a dry patch. And I think the thing to remember is, first of all, that's normal. And second of all, the only way to kind of resolve a dry patch, or to resolve a stretch where you're not having sex and it's becoming an issue, and you're kind of, because I kind of feel like it gets to a point where you both want to do it, but you're nervous because you can't, like, it's almost like, well, we've gone on so long now, how do I initiate this? And it's almost like you've forgotten how to get into it with your partner. I have found in the past, and from talking to people, it all comes down to communication, obviously, but one kind of way of getting into it again, getting back into a cycle where you are comfortable initiating sex and you are comfortable having sex, is genuinely, if you really feel, I'm really in the mood today. And particularly for women, I think this, in a heterosexual relationship, this can be really helpful. If you really feel like you want to have sex on a day, it's incredibly easy, and it's much easier, I think, for a man to be willing to have sex, to kind of turn it on, than for a woman. So if you just take, like, literally count to 10, count backwards from 10, and just approach your partner, and like obviously at an appropriate time. You're not going to do it while you're sitting in traffic or while you're cooking the dinner, but like, approach your partner. I don't know, take off an item of clothing, just do something, a small thing, count down from 10 and just do it. And before you know it, like, the hardest part is that first step, that first approach. It's kind of like, you know, that person, I can't remember her name, but she basically uses this method to get out of bed every morning. When her alarm goes off, she
5, 4,
counts
3,
down.
2, 1.
Exactly. She counts 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then she just does it. And before she knows it, she's up and she's not thinking about it anymore, and her day is begun. And I would often use that, or advise people to use that method when it comes to reinitiating sex. Another thing I would also say is, you do have to communicate with your partner. So if it has come to a point where you're not having sex or whatever, it can be so awkward because there's such a fear of rejection. So like, you don't want to talk to your partner and be like, why aren't we having sex? In case they go, well, actually, you're not looking great lately. Not that they would say that, but you know what I mean? You just don't want to feel self-conscious. You don't want to feel, and like, a lot of people can't even say the word sex. Like, obviously for you and I, it's something that we can semi-freely talk about, but a lot of people can't even approach that topic. So what I would advise is coming up with, and this sounds silly, but coming up with some kind of code word, right? So when you are in like the humor for sex or whatever, or when you're maybe even post sex, and you want to come up with like a code word for doing it for the next time, so that the lull doesn't have to go on, and you can kind of make it lighthearted. Like, what my husband says to me sometimes is, I'll leave, say I'll walk out of the bathroom and I won't have a top on after a shower or something like this, and he'll go, are you trying to seduce me? And it's kind of like a lighthearted way of flirting with me. Because I mean, we've been married for 5 years. We've known each other for 17 years. So it would be very easy for us to get into a lull where we don't have sex for a while or whatever. But he'll say something like that. And oftentimes I'll go, yeah, I am trying to seduce you. And that's kind of a silent, like, now we might not have sex there and then, but that's kind of an indication to him that I am actually feeling it, and maybe approach me later about this. Do you know, the kind of way? So it's kind of, there's like silent messages you can give to your partner. Another thing is that you can discuss and that you can kind of agree on is something like, because oftentimes one partner won't want to initiate with the other partner in case they're not feeling it, in case it's not, you know, it's not the right time, and they might not know, and it's hard to know. So I would suggest doing something like, in your bedroom, if you are in the mood, light a candle on your bedside locker. And that's an indication to your partner, if they're feeling it as well, the candle is lighting, which means we're good to go. Or else it could be a case of getting into bed with no pajama top on. Like, that could be a silent signal to your partner that you're in the humor, and if they're also in the humor, let's go. And it takes away the rejection as well. So if you're not in the humor, no one has to say anything in particular, and you can just have a cuddle or watch a film or do whatever. But that could be a way of taking away that awkwardness. And believe me, once it restarts, if you've been in a lull, once it restarts, once you take that step, once you do it once, the weight that will be lifted off your shoulders will be immense, and you'll just feel so much more at ease, and you'll feel so much more intimate with your partner, and you'll remember why you loved having sex in the first place. And it's, you know, because it is about intimacy more so than even about, you know, physical pleasure. It's about connection with your partner, and that is something that, you know, when it's not there, you really do miss it. So yeah. That would be my very long-winded advice.
Yeah, my advice is dirty text. I like this is in, you know, that book Mating in Captivity. You read that one?
Yeah.
So like, she says about dirty texting as well. Like, you know, I feel like sometimes it can be very hard, especially if you grew up in Ireland, to say you're horny. So sometimes it's better to be like, oh, can't wait to see you tonight, like devil face, like something like that, and then that starts the fire, and then you start thinking about it. You start like having like frisky flashbacks, or sometimes I'd be like, remember that time, and I feel like that like is my indication as well, because sometimes like it's hard when you're like actually in person. I think sometimes so I think like those dirty texts as well, or remember that time we did that, and sometimes those things like re-spark
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I really,
that's a really good one. Yeah.
yeah. And then like also like really assessing why you're not having sex, because sometimes like if you actually do not want to have sex, you know, what do you do then if you know you can't initiate it if you actually don't want to have sex? Sometimes I assess myself of why don't I want to have sex, and sometimes it's because I'm in my masculine energy and I'm like taking control, and I have to just let him be like, hey babe, can you like plan something for me and like take over this energy? Like I actually say things like that because that makes me really attractive. Like when Jack's out doing his own thing, like distance creates desire for me. I think for everyone, when Jack is doing his own thing, and like, and with any relationship I've ever been in, when they're like initiating and taking control, I feel like that's quite sexy. And at the same, he probably feels like my masculine energy is sexy, and like, you know what I mean. But sometimes I need to fall into my feminine to feel that attraction as well. So usually when he's out doing his own thing, I'm like, you know, when he's playing a football match, I'm like, hi, hello, you know, doing his own thing. So if you're constantly in your pocket with your partner, I feel like you need to create that little bit of distance, because it definitely, for me, definitely, it's in that book, Mating in Captivity, if anyone wants to go for that. See, this one I can answer as well, because constantly overthinking in my head during sex, how do I be more in the moment? And I get so many messages about people doing the meditation course about their sex life. So when I'm doing my introductions and talking about the benefits of meditation, I'm like, your sex life becomes so much better, not only because you're out of your head, you have more acceptance and self-love for yourself, and you also can feel more. Because this is so funny, because I was doing my meditation course and we had to meditate for long periods of time, obviously. And it's crazy what you can tune into whenever you are in tune with your body and away from your thoughts. Because when your thoughts are so clogged up with what do I look like? What am I going to do tomorrow? When you actually sit and be present, you can literally feel your vagina throbbing from your ovulation, from when you're ovulating, when you're meditating, if you're so tuned into your body, and you can be like, I'm actually horny now. And because your thoughts are kind of out. So when you're in your head all day, how can you feel sexy if you don't even know what's going on in your own body? So I always say, like, one of the things from meditation for me was my eating changed, because I tuned into my actual hunger levels, and I wasn't eating for my emotions. I was eating because I actually can tune into when I'm hungry and when I'm not. And also, like, when I'm ovulating or when I'm feeling sexually charged, I can feel it in my meditation and be like, okay, yeah. So that's something I would say. But what do you think if people are constantly in their heads?
Yeah, well, like, one of the things I think for sex to be successful for women, as in if we want to have orgasms, we do need to be very, very, very present. And I don't know about anyone else, like, if you're listening and you've ever been a millisecond away from having an orgasm, and then all of a sudden a hair falls on your face, or I don't know, you think of what happened earlier in the day or whatever, and it's gone, and that thing is gone forever. Like, you'll never get that one back. And it can be so disheartening and disruptive. And it's because it's difficult enough to get to that point on the best of days. So I think, if you're always in your head, I think it can be an extended period of foreplay can be quite good to take you out of your day-to-day life. So if you are finding that when you're having sex that you're not really fully tuned in and you're not really feeling your body and, you know, all that kind of stuff, spending a little bit of extra time before the actual penetration or whatever starts to happen, and spending that bit of time with your partner and letting them, or yourself, whatever it is, even if you're doing it by yourself, just feel it, explore your body, you know, focus on it in the same way that when you're meditating or doing yoga, you concentrate on your breathing, concentrating on the physical touch of a hand on your leg. And it doesn't have to be incredibly sexual. It could just be, I find often a massage, like a back massage or a hand massage or anything like that, can really kind of tune you in to noticing your body. Because if you ever had a massage or a facial or anything in a spa, for the first few minutes you are thinking about, you know, what you have to do today at work, or what's going on tomorrow with the kids, or whatever it is. But then after a while, you do start just focusing on the hand on your back, or the warmth, or the whatever. So an extended period of foreplay can be a good way to tune yourself in. So after, the first 10 minutes, you might be a bit distracted, but then eventually you will kind of settle into it, I think. And another thing I would just say is, this sounds so practical and so silly, but the way, if you want to have a really good night's sleep, you can like brain dump onto a piece of paper, and you can literally write down, you can be like, here's every single thing that's crossing my mind at the minute. I'm going to put it in a notepad, I'm going to close it, and I'm going to deal with that tomorrow. If you're about to have sex, run into the bathroom, write a load of things in your notes app, close your phone, leave it down, and then go into that in the mindset of, this is time for me. This is time for me and my partner. This is what I'm doing now. And just have that in your head, like my mind is clear. And I know obviously anyone who might not be used to meditation or used to doing yoga or focusing on the breathing might struggle with that concept, but it is definitely worth, if that isn't something that you are used to, that extended foreplay period can be really helpful. And I mean, there's always a case to be made for foreplay with no sex at the end, and to get yourself into the habit of just really switching off and really relaxing. So yeah, that's what I would say to that. But like, don't get me wrong, there are days where you can't relax, you can't get into it, and that's absolutely fine. And something I think people struggle with is, and this is probably a bit of a generalization, but I think women struggle with this, is you're getting into it and you're having sex, or you're in kind of doing, I don't know, maybe oral sex, or whatever, hand shandies as I call them, whatever it is that you're starting off with, and you're just not really feeling it, and you're just not in the mood. It is totally fine to call it a day at that point. It's totally fine to be like, do you know what, actually, will we just wrap it up here? Like, in whatever way you want to say it, whatever way you want to just give the signal that it's not going to happen, because there is nothing worse and there's nothing more, it'll just deflate you completely and make you not look forward to sex, is if you go through with sex anyway and it's not successful for you, or even worse, you pretend it's successful for you and it hasn't been. And I know a lot of people do that. And I'd say, if I once polled my Instagram and I asked, basically, have you ever faked an orgasm? And I think about 45% said yes. But then I was like, I know for a fact that if I polled anonymously somehow, if there was some way I could anonymously poll people, it would be 95%. And that is something that gets in your head. If you really feel like, oh my God, I've initiated sex and I'm just not feeling it, and I don't think I'm going to have an orgasm, and I just want this to end, or whatever it is, and you fake it, that will make you dread the next time. And it will.
I always call it the trap. I'm like, never, ever, ever do it. It's like, I did it in a past relationship.
Yeah.
And I think I did it every time.
Yeah.
And he like obviously thought
totally
that this was, and then I was like, oh my God, I have to, and he didn't know what he was doing. Like, real, like, this wasn't even like a relationship, guys, in case everyone thinks it's going to go through my exes. This was like a thing, but it wasn't it every time. But I remember being like, I'm stuck in this trap because he expects it every time now. So I had to fake it every time. And then after that, I was like, it's a trap.
It doesn't encourage them to, I don't
mean
work harder, but be better. Like, that's not a way to make your sex life more satisfying. Like, that's all that's doing is giving them false hope or whatever. Because if you fake it, they're not going to be like, they're going to leave that interaction thinking, geez, I gave my good stuff there. That was some of my best work. Yeah. And it wasn't. And I think that's something that's a conversation that, obviously incredibly difficult to have, but the best way to put a stop to that is to not fake it anymore. And if you have been doing it, if you have a track record of faking it, just stop. And trust me, what will happen is they might feel a little bit like, well, whoa, this is weird. Why isn't this happening? It usually happens pretty easily. What will happen is they'll be motivated to make sure it starts happening again. And you owe it to yourself, I think, to have enjoyable sex. And look, don't get me wrong, I have often had really enjoyable sex where I didn't have an orgasm at the end. Mm-hmm. But if that's something that you want, and that's something that you believe can happen for you, a lot, there are plenty of women and plenty of men, I'm sure, who struggle with actually achieving orgasm. But if it's something that regularly happens for you, and if it can happen for you while you're by yourself, it should be able to happen while you're having sex with your partner. And so definitely just reel back on the fakes and start, getting into kind of, being able to say to someone, like, you're having sex with them, it's very intimate. You should be able to be like, I really enjoyed that kind of.
I think you can use it as a game. I've used it as a game. So I'm like, okay, like before sex or at a date night, I'll be like, okay, what do you like and what do you want more of? And then it gets us wound up, and then he'll go, what do you want more of? And I go, well, I really like it when you do this, but if you did it like this, then I think that would be better. And I think turn it into a sexy game. And you can even have, like if you're a person, I'm a person who does like weekly check-ins as the relationship, I feel like this, I feel like that. Sometimes we turn it into, let's do it about our sexual stuff, like what do you want more of? What do you like? And it's kind of this like veto where you can be like, you can say anything here and it won't annoy me because we're in the conversation about it. But it's just having that guts to like talk about it. But I definitely say like use it as a game, or if you're on a date night, but like, okay, let's talk about sex, and like over the table, or even text. And like another thing for that girl, which she says, why kind of not get in the moment, or why do I'm in my head. I think a really good thing to do is if you don't want to say face to face, I think texting and saying like, what is it that you like about our sex, and what and then getting that reassurance. And then not only are you starting foreplay by these texts or by this conversation, but you're also getting reassurance of what that person actually likes about you, because there's so much I like about my sex, but I don't sit and tell him. So like to give him that reassurance. Not only turns him on.
Do you know what's really what can be really good as well, right? So directly after you have sex, your chances are you're both naked and you're both lying beside each other, right? So you're in a really intimate position as it is, and you've just had potentially the closest possible interaction you could have with another human being, right? So you're already in that place. You're probably looking at each other. You're probably lying there thinking how great that was, or how shit that was, or whatever you're thinking. It can be really good at that point to do a little debrief, right? So like this is what myself and my husband do regularly. Is just after we have sex, we say, I'll turn to him and I'll be like, that was 10 out of 10. And he'll be like, it was 10 out of 10. And then we'll kind of say, I'll say to him, what was your favorite bit? And he'll say, oh, well, I really like that part. And then I'll say, well, yeah, that this was my favorite bit. Or I'll say, oh, this part after you did this. And we'll just have a little bit of a chat with it, go through what we enjoyed. We don't usually say what we didn't enjoy, but I think it kind of is unsaid in a way. Like if you're like, well, I really liked this, it kind of draws attention to the positive. And it's a good way of bringing up things, and it's a good way of just pointing them in the direction of things that really work for you. So that can be a good time for that. Like, so if you don't want to do a pre-sex with text or whatever, post-sex, what do they call it? Like a match report or whatever is a good way of kind of just summarizing it.
Just go for it, because watch how it will change your like sex, because that initial like step forward of having the conversation is hard, but then watch your next sex, if you know what I mean.
Oh my god, totally.
So only able to have an orgasm with a vibrator, never have without / with my BF help. I'm like, bring the vibrator, it is your friend, it is fine. And I think use yourself. I feel like why does the man have to do the work? Sometimes you can both. You can do it, and it is so sexy for a man to see a girl taking control of her own body. And if you can do it by yourself, that means you can do it in the relationship. And I feel like you need to be confident enough to bring that in, because it's fucking sexy. And I remember like before, I gained my sexual confidence at one point, and I was like, I don't care anymore, like this is what I like, blah blah blah. But before that, I didn't have sex. I had sex and like waited for him to do all the performance. You know what I mean? And then like once I learned, I was like, oh, okay, I can do all this. And they find it so fucking hot whenever you're doing it on yourself as well. So don't be afraid to bring the vibrator, because once he learns what it can do and what you can do with your own hands as well on yourself, I feel like it's sexy. He learns, you learn, it's all good. So there's no shame in that. But also being in Ireland, I'm guessing, is a shameful thing to be hot and sexy like that. What do you think?
I think the vibrator thing completely, if you're confident to bring that into your sexual relationship, absolutely do it. What I have found anecdotally is that some men can be a bit intimidated by vibrators, particularly if they look like dicks. So some vibrators don't, like, so some, you know what I mean? So there are dildos that actually look like penises, and they kind of mimic the look of the penis, and they're very phallic and they're very long, whatever. If you feel like that might be an issue for your partner, I would advise getting a vibrator that doesn't look like a penis in shape. So there's one that I have it almost looks like it's like a hair drop shape, and it doesn't, like, to look at, you wouldn't be like, well, that's a big dick, and you know what I mean? And it's like bring the type of vibrator that maybe isn't used for penetrative sex, like, so one that like you don't actually totally something
can't
like
go
that.
wrong with a bullet.
Absolutely. But even a bullet is a little bit phallic, so something that if you want to introduce a vibrator and you're not sure how that would go, introduce something that doesn't necessarily look like a penis, whether it's a big one or a small one, or anything that's not kind of phallic shaped. Yeah. But then also, you know, with the bringing in the vibrator thing, and you're totally right, it's so sexy, and you know, your partner will find you being able to do that sexy. But bear in mind as well, like there's a huge percentage of women who cannot have orgasms from penetrative sex alone. I think it's something like it's a high percentage. It's like in the 70s, right? So clitoral stimulation is key for most women, right? It's key for most women. And there are plenty of women who have, like, we're kind of trained to think from porn and from just films and life in general, that the minute the dick goes in, like, bam, we're achieving orgasm. And it's totally ridiculous.
I remember my first time having sex and being like, I thought I was going to be like in this amazing euphoria because of what I've seen. Do you know what I mean? And then when I had sex, I was like, oh
yeah, oh okay, yeah, this is going to take longer than I thought. And like, this is the thing, it doesn't happen in 10 seconds like it does in the movies, and it doesn't happen with no other effort put in like it does in porn. Like, it takes a lot. And so genuinely, I feel if the person that put that into the question box can't orgasm from penetrative sex, that isn't an issue.
No, that's not an issue at all.
And I think bring the vibrator, or even just pleasure yourself while you're with your partner. And it doesn't have to be like, it doesn't have to be like, okay, penetrative sex has to be where the climax happens, you know. The climax can happen anytime. So you could have penetrative sex with, you know, a dick or a dildo or whatever it is for like 15, 20 minutes, and then stop that, and then separately from that have an orgasm. Like, open the constraints of what you think that should look like. And once you do that, your sex life will become so much freer and so much more successful and so much more, you know, just pleasant for you. Because the rule that, like, okay, we have foreplay, then the dick goes in, then bam 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 bam, 20 seconds later I'm screaming like a banshee, like, that's not how it happens, and that's not how it works. And we really need to remove that narrative from the concept of sex. You know, it can happen any kind of way. You could have an orgasm before anything even goes near your vagina, like your vulva. Like, there are so many women who can orgasm from just like nipple stimulation alone. The world is our oyster, and we literally just need to take away the rule book and make our own, in a sense. So yeah, I really think the person who hasn't ever had an orgasm with her boyfriend, if your boyfriend is present, you're having an orgasm with your boyfriend. You're having sex. They don't have to be near you. They don't have to be touching you. They don't have to have anything in any of your orifices in order for you to have had an orgasm with your partner. All that needs to happen is that they're there and they're involved, and they might be, you know, kissing you or using the vibrator on you or using their hands on you or whatever it is. So yeah, I think like if we stop thinking about sex in such a kind of regimented, this is how it has to happen kind of way, that like it just opens up so many possibilities.
Yeah, for sure. I love the sex podcast. I'm just like so into all these questions. I'm like, yes. Okay. So a lot of people ask about squirting. So can we talk about squirting? Is that like too graphic?
No, it's totally fine.
Someone says when I squirt, I'm scared it's pee, but it's sometimes so much.
Okay, so on that, having genuinely zero personal experience with that issue, I have heard from friends or from people I've interviewed over the course of years that the squirting thing often is wee, right? Sometimes it's genuine, like a female ejaculate, which I think you would know the difference, you know, if because it's thicker and it's creamier and it's kind of similar to male ejaculate, really. But sometimes down there's so much going on, there's so much stimulation, there's so much pressure, there's so much, you know, just activity and moisture, and there's a lot going on. And sometimes during orgasm, women can pee a little bit or a lot. So it may well be wee. And if that happens, I mean, your pee is one of the most sterile things in the world. So it's nothing to be ashamed about or to be worried about or anything like that. And if you are uncomfortable with it or whatever, I would just say, and maybe you're not sure, I would just say, like, the rule is, you know, pee after sex so you don't get a UTI. If you're worried about that happening, pee before sex, just so you can rule out that it was wee and not, you know, a female ejaculation. And if it does happen and it's something you're self-conscious about, I would hazard a guess that 9 times out of 10 that would be incredibly sexy for whoever you're having sex with, because if there was ever a sign that, you know, someone is turned on and someone is really enjoying what's happening, it's that. So yeah, I would just say to, again, not be worried about it, not be ashamed of it, and if it is wee, no big deal. In the same way that, you know, I suppose if you accidentally get a period while you're having sex, it's no big deal. These are bodily functions. It's nothing to be worried about. It's nothing to be ashamed of. And it happens to plenty of people. You're not the only one that's happening to. Yeah, so that's what I would have to say on that. But bearing in mind, I have no experience myself.
Let it flow, guys. Let it flow. It just depends, I suppose, as well, if you're in a relationship or with one night stand, because it depends how comfortable you are. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
I mean, to be honest, like with a one night stand, if it's a one night stand, you never have to see that face again if you don't want to, so fine. And then if you're in a relationship, hopefully you're at a stage in your relationship where, you know, you're kind of past the point of absolute mortification. And if it's somewhere in the middle and you've been dating someone and you've maybe had sex with them 3 or 4 times and you're like, oh my God, like I said, and I would advise any woman, any man, any person, I would advise this. If you are having sex with someone, chances are they are just delighted to be there. They are willing participants in whatever's happening. So if anything like that, if, like even, you know, funny noises that might emerge from places that you might be embarrassed about, any of those things, genuinely, if there's a moment where you're like, oh my God, that was so embarrassing, the best thing to do in that situation is just laugh about it. Just have a giggle. Because otherwise you'll get into your head. Otherwise it'll be awkward for them. Yeah. So if you are relaxed enough to just be like, oh my God, how embarrassing, and just kind of call it out on the spot, it just takes away all the tension, takes away the embarrassment, makes them comfortable, makes you comfortable, and you can just move on from it. So if anything like that, anything kind of that you would consider embarrassing happens, that's the best thing to do, to just have a giggle and move on straight away, because 9 times out of 10, the person that you're having sex with doesn't care, is just so happy to be having sex with you.
To be there.
Absolutely delighted to be there. Yeah.
So a lot of people are saying like they're in love with their partners, but they're never in the mood. I love them so much, but don't know what's wrong with me, right? I think this is, sometimes you got to question what you like in sex. Like I think, right, a lot of men think let's have sex at night. All right. When we go to bed, that's when we try and initiate. All right. But I am always rather too tired. And I'm also I have a lot of pain at night because I'm digesting all my food from the day. So I get a lot of flare up around the nighttime.
Yeah.
So if you're like me and you feel really full at night and you feel really tired, and I feel like by the time you go to bed, you literally, for me, can't be arsed when I go to bed unless I say, let's go to bed early. And then he knows I'm in the mood.
Yeah.
So I always say, for me, I'm like, I'm too tired. And I don't even say that. I'm just like, you need to initiate more in the day. And I like to initiate more in the day.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I'm never in the mood when I'm tired at night, especially. So I'm like, okay, if we want to have sex, I think you need to initiate more in the day. So, because they start snogging you at night, you know, when you're in bed. What about snogging me in the middle of the day? Smacking my arse, tell me I look good. Yeah. So if you actually say to them, look, I'm usually not in the mood at night. This is just if you're the kind of person who gets really tired at night, like why ask me now when I'm tired and I'm in bed, like, or, you know, in the middle of the day, like really start initiating with a good old fucking wet snog.
Yeah.
I definitely think having that conversation, being like, I want you to initiate more during the day, because at the night you probably notice I'm usually not in the mood.
Yeah.
So,
but you know, I like often as well, I think certainly for me, and I think for a lot of women, being in the mood doesn't come as naturally to us as it might to men, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So, and I don't mean that to be like women aren't as horny as men, because I really firmly believe that we are. But I think if you are like the person who wrote in said, if you love your partner, you're attracted to them, and you still don't necessarily feel in the mood, right? I mean, there's a lot going on. There's a fucking pandemic. There's a war. There's you've got a job, you've got responsibilities, you've got a lot on your shoulders. A lot of people are carrying a lot of stuff around with them, right? So to unblock that and all of a sudden be like, oh my God, I'm just so horny. Like, that's so difficult. It is so, so difficult. So sometimes what I say is, instead of waiting for your body to tell you that you're horny, tell your body that you're horny. So you make the first step. So what I sometimes suggest is, instead of, waiting around for all of a sudden your body to go, you are now in the mood for sex, you test it out. So go up to your partner in the middle of the day or at night or whenever the mood takes you, whenever you feel is appropriate, and lob the gob and just, kiss them for 60 seconds. And before you know it, you will be feeling it.
Yeah.
I can almost guarantee it. You will feel something. You will be like, oh my God, that was hot, because, we haven't kissed for 60 seconds in a long time, or because, after you finish being a teenager, kissing for 60 seconds feels like a long time. There's a lot of shit can get done in 60 seconds. So do that, initiate that. And look, the great thing about that is you can kiss for 60 seconds and have a bit of a feel or whatever in the kitchen in the middle of the day, or at nighttime, or whatever the case may be. And if it doesn't go anywhere and you're not feeling it, you're not feeling it. That's fine. You don't need to continue anything. You can just have that kiss and you can leave them wanting more, actually. Or you can just be like, that was lovely, wasn't it? And move on with your day. However, if you do that and then all of a sudden you are feeling a bit of a tingle, or you are feeling a bit, oh my God, that was pretty hot. If it's appropriate, have sex then. If it's not appropriate, leave it till later, or leave it till whatever. But you almost need to take the barrier down and let your body know that you can potentially be open to feeling horny. I think for men it is different, and obviously I can't speak for a man because I'm not one, but I think for men it's different. Their bodies kind of lead the way a bit more in terms of the horn, whereas for us as women, I think we do have a lot more to plow through. We have hormones, we have cycles, we have this, that, and the other to get through before our bodies prioritize the horn, except for maybe around ovulation, when our bodies really genuinely do go, have sex now, you're going to get pregnant, because biologically that's what our bodies want. But outside of the ovulation window, if you want your body to know that it's horny, you kind of have to tell it sometimes. Mm-hmm. And so I definitely would say, give that a try, make a move and see what happens. And if nothing happens, don't worry about it, because that's your body then going, actually, no, genuinely, I'm not horny today. But I think, sitting around waiting for that feeling to happen isn't like, that's not going to you know, that's not going to lead to you having, you know, sitting around and waiting for it to happen is not, it's not always going to be successful, I suppose.
And like, have you ever sex journaled have you ever done a sex meditation?
No, I haven't.
Oh, you need to do a sex meditation. They're so fun. So you can do, like there's full things on them. And I would love to do one, but I'm like, okay, I need to do this. I will do it one day. Like I will like do one for people. So basically like if you can do it in journaling as well, if you're not a meditator, but you can do the first time you had sex with your partner, or think about the time that you had sex with your partner that was really amazing. And when you take that moment to just think about that, you're fucking wet, like you're horny, because you've had really good. If you look at your part, if you're saying like, oh, I'm with them 10 years, not having much sex anymore, like, but there was a point in your relationship where you did, and if you think of those moments, then you can bring yourself back to those moments, and you can get back into those. Also, ask yourself, at that moment when you were having a lot of sex with your partner, what was going on around you? All right. Because, you know, you might not have had kids. You might have had a lot of more free time. You might have felt better within yourself. And think about where you were in your career. Think about all those things, and then be like, okay, what's going on with me that I don't want to have sex? And then you can re-examine, be like, oh, this time I was feeling really good because I was doing this. I have more time because of the kids. Maybe at that point you can be like, okay, I need a little bit of time. So you would ask someone to babysit, and you would have that moment, because obviously there's a lot of things going on if you're together like 10 years. So I definitely think sex journaling. So basically thinking about the moment. So even if you text her and be like, remember that time in such and such, think about that moment and meditate on it, journal on it, and be like, you literally will get wet. Like it's so horny to think about
again,
those times.
that is you telling your body to feel a certain way. It's kind of like I said, instead of waiting around for your body to give you the signals, you're reverse engineering your own body, which is like, we have to do that in so many other ways, but sex is definitely something that we can reverse engineer, and I think we should.
And the shadow of the third, do you ever hear that one?
No, what's that?
When someone else is it's in Mating and Captivity, it's in that book where someone else fancies your partner, and you're like, oh, that can make you instead of being jealous about someone chatting up your husband or whatever, you can be like, oh, that's actually quite hot that someone desires him. Do you know what I mean? But try not to make them jealous, because that's but, there's that. But yeah, like I know you have to go now, so I'm so sad about it, because we could have talked
for longer. We could have, and I definitely think we could do a part 2 and answer more questions.
That's what I was thinking. I was just gonna say, guys, if you like this and you want us to do it like regularly, then please like put it in the reviews.
Definitely.
And stuff like that. Because I really enjoyed it, and I feel like I like to talk about this stuff as well, because I feel like there's literally like a million questions. We only got through like 5.
Gosh.
Oh, I'm sad about that. But we can keep these questions for the next time.
Definitely.
Or for your podcast. We can
Oh my God, screen grab, because we'll definitely do an episode of private education, like 100%. Yeah, for sure.
So where can people find you?
So if you want to follow me, I'm at Aisling Keenan on Instagram, but my podcast is at Private Education Podcast on Instagram. And there is always, like, I'd always have, like, the same as you, I'd always have questions up and polls up and all that kind of stuff. We're on a break at the minute, but season 2 is starting, like, I think the first Tuesday in August. So not too long to wait for the next season. And we've got
loads
of
episodes.
So, oh my God, there's like 72 episodes up there already. And the last one actually was really cool. We interviewed a guy who attends sex parties with his partner. And it was just really interesting, because again, you know, it's not really something, it's kind of, that's scene is still kind of underground. It's not something that I would be very familiar with.
And there's so many sex parties everywhere that we don't even know about.
Totally. It is going on. So, it was really interesting to talk to him, but that's where it's at Private Education Podcast.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And guys, if you like this, leave a review. Let us know if you want a part 2. And thank you for now.
Thank you so much.